The tight end position for the Denver Broncos is always an interesting one, considering the offensive struggles the last couple of years. However, with a brand new offensive scheme, how might that change? Do the Broncos potentially have the next Kyle Juszczyk on their roster as is, who is a free agent, or could they look elsewhere? We take a look at this and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's good, Broncos country? Welcome back into a brand new episode of Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked on NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. Both of us, we cover the Denver Broncos for the Locked on Network and 9 News. Once again, Broncos country, thank you so much for making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day, whether you listen on your favorite audio podcasting platform or whether you watch us here on YouTube. If you're a brand new viewer or listener to the show, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. Courtesy of both Sayre and myself, we have you covered every single day, all year long, because for the true fan, there is never an off-season. Sayre, my friend, hey, it's great to see you. We're now just getting ready to wrap up our Denver Broncos free agency preview. We've gone through a multitude of pretty much every position on the team. We close it out today with the tight end position. And what an interesting group that Denver has right now. And obviously a couple of free agents, and there's some intriguing prospects that will be available during the free agency market, man. But I can't wait to break it all down with you.
I can't wait. This is one of my favorite positions on the team. I think, I've said it before. I love wide receivers. Tight ends, that's a close second for me. I love guys that catch the ball. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. So, and I love the Broncos' current group, honestly. And so I think, how are we going to upgrade this position in the offseason? Who's going to be coming back? We take a look back at everything that happened in 2021. I'm excited to break it down, man.
Well, and I think you make an interesting point, too. I do love the Broncos tight end group, and I think that they have been extremely underutilized in the last couple of years, Sayre. I think really 2019, we saw, like, everyone was so down on Noah Fant, but Noah Fant was actually on pace for a very damn good rookie season. I mean, closing in on some things that obviously Mike Ditka was doing. But, outside of that, the offense, I think, has really kind of predicated this narrative that the Broncos tight end unit isn't very good, which I think it's completely false that narrative is being thrown out there. I think that what we've seen from these guys in particular, we're going to recap here in 2021, starting off here with Noah Fant. This is a guy that gets a lot of unwarranted criticism, in my opinion. Yes, absolutely. I think when we look at his on-field product in terms of what he can do better, he can be a better blocker. I don't think there's any disputing that. However, he was primarily used here as a typical Y tight end, inline, having to block pass rushers. I mean, I will never forget when you go back to 2020, remember against the Steelers, Sayre, when Noah Fant was used as a receiver in that second half? What happened? The Broncos almost came back and won, and particularly because of him and his impact. What did we see this year against the Steelers? We saw him sitting in pass protection one-on-one against TJ Watt. Like, come on. Like, what is going on? And a lot of that, I think, is on the coaching staff, too. Noah even talked about it with me during Super Bowl week. He said, this year I played a lot of Y, and he's like, and it was a learning experience for me. And he says, I do feel like that with my size and with some of my speed, I feel like I can be used on the outside in some mismatched situations, and I completely agree. I feel like Noah Fant, for the most part, was underutilized in this Broncos offense under Pat Shurmur in 2021.
I really think so, too, honestly. I do. And I know that a lot of times, these kind of things come across as excuses, but really, 2 years of the same patterns, we can see. I think everybody in Broncos country would hate to see what Noah Fant would look like on a team that has competent offensive coaching and a good quarterback. Because why? Because we would be like, why didn't we use him that way? Why didn't we split him out? Why didn't we match him up in red zone? And there's so many different aspects to Noah Fant's game that were completely ignored in 2021, especially, and we talked about this almost weekly on the show, for anybody that wasn't listening during the season, yards after the catch. Yes. Where were the opportunities after the catch for Noah Fant? He was constantly running his routes and having to go back towards the line of scrimmage to make catches, or he was making receptions near the out-of-bounds line, the boundary. He was doing so many different things that he's not necessarily – I'm not saying he's not good at it. His catch percentage continues to go up. He was the leading receiver on the team, and I don't think many people really realize that. So Obviously Noah Fant has untapped potential at this point. And I think that the reason that we can say that is because we have seen in his rookie season in 2019 like you said, Cody, I mean, he was on a historic pace. If he didn't get off to a slow start that season, he would have destroyed every rookie tight end record. But beyond that, I mean, it was the best rookie season for a tight end in Broncos history. And what did he do the best in 2019? That Rich Scangarello, for all his faults, what he did best was scheme ways to get Noah Fant yards after the catch. He was one of the best in the NFL at doing that in 2019. And so I think that's what the Broncos need to get back to in 2022 with Nathaniel Hackett, obviously, and his staff coming in.
You know what I want to see more of Noah Fant this year in terms of the Broncos coaches? I want to see him being utilized this way. This way, not this way. I want to see him vertically. There was
Yeah.
this narrative early on in the season. Oh, he can't break a tackle. Well, he was being thrown legitimately against zone coverage. He's coming at an average depth of 4 yards per target. That's what the Broncos coaching staff, the offensive scheme, had him running at 4 yards depth across the field horizontally. And what was happening, Sayre, was that they were throwing him right into a defender. I mean, it's like, what do you expect? And especially when the play would drag out really long. I mean, Noah Fant is climbing across the field, and this is on tape on several occasions, coming all the way across the field. And then once he's thrown the ball, he catches it either behind him right here or right in front of him, right into contact with the defender. I'm like, people are bagging on Noah Fant for the wrong reasons. And look, if you go back and you watch the tape, you can see where the Broncos offense went wrong. There was another guy, though, too. Let's talk about Albert Okwuegbunam here. I felt like in 2021, we were going to see a little bit more opportunity for him coming in, into a rotation on this Broncos offense, coming off of ACL surgery. We thought, okay, hey, the Broncos have 2 legitimate tight ends that they can use in the red zone in some double tight situations here. But when the Broncos would go downfield to Albert O in big moments this year, and I go back to the Baltimore Ravens game where Denver could have had a chance to jump on them early, he dropped a touchdown. He had several big drops throughout this season. So I'm not sure if that's just youth jitters, whatever it may be. But when the Broncos needed something big from Albert O, unfortunately, he couldn't deliver.
That's right. And it was unfortunate to see because there were some seriously high expectations for him after the injury last year. He looked really good before the injury, but also remember in his rookie season back in 2020, drops were kind of the story for him then as well.
Yeah.
Remember that New England Patriots game from 2020 when Drew Lock, they went in and Drew Lock was kind of fresh off the injury and it was kind of like the COVID, replacement delay game or whatever for the Patriots. And Albert O dropped like 3 touchdowns in that game. So that's kind of unfortunately been a theme for him through the first 2 seasons. You don't like to see that, of course. You don't want to see that. But at the same time, the spectacular plays have also been there. I mean, he's made some really big-time runs after the catch. He's done some great I mean, the play that he made when he caught – remember the pass from Teddy Bridgewater where he had to lunge towards the pylon for the touchdown on 4th down? I mean, those types of things are what we expect from Alberto. We expect the big-time plays in the red zone. We expect him to make plays after the catch. What we can't have is those plays where he's wide open down the field for a game-changing, like you mentioned against the Ravens, the wide open, game-changing types of plays. You've got to reel those passes in. And frankly, a lot of those types of plays, Cody, if we're looking at the broad spectrum for the Broncos offense, those have kind of been hindrances over the last couple seasons, haven't they? They've kind of been just that death by inches. The Broncos dropped a lot of passes like that. So that's exactly what it's been. And for Alberto, year 3, it's going to be a huge, huge opportunity for him. Of course, you're a great athlete. You have outstanding size. Your catch radius is ridiculous. Now, what we need you to do is we need you to go out there and be consistent.
What's a more traumatizing term for Broncos country? Leader of men or death by inches? That's a great poll question we'll have to put out this week. No, you make some great points there on Alberto, and look, it's a big season for him, and to see what this coaching staff will do to kind of get he and Noah Fant more utilized. The Broncos have a couple of other options on the roster as there's some expiring deals. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. We'll talk about Andrew Beck and Eric Saubert and their potential status and future with the organization. But before we do that, folks, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. That's our good friends over there, betonline.net. And football might be over for the season. Sadly enough, we are bummed out too, but guess what? Basketball and college hoops for the both pro game is still going on. You have March Madness that's coming up as well, so you can get all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, and even where the next fired head coach is going to land. And BetOnline, they are the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. As we continue on the second half action on today's episode, Lockdown Broncos, Denver Broncos free agency preview at the tight end position. We talked about Noah Fant, Albert Okwuegbunam, their impact last season, where they can grow. The Broncos have two tight ends that have deals that are expiring currently here for the Broncos, okay? And we're looking at Eric Saubert, who is a key offseason acquisition, in my opinion, coming over from the Jacksonville Jaguars the prior year. And then you also had Andrew Beck, who kind of played that hybrid fullback, not necessarily tight end, but, the more I think about the Broncos going to this outside zone scheme, kind of similar to the 49ers, kind of similar to what you see with the Green Bay Packers, I can't help but think, and I want to look at Andrew Beck here first, Sarah. And obviously for him, he won the, going back to the Salute to Service Award of the year for the NFL for what he does, working with military members, men and women. Obviously a major thank you to him for the work that he does there. You can tell how passionate he is there. I don't want to sound like this is going to be a hot take, but I feel like if the Broncos bring him back in this offense, we can see Andrew Beck utilized kind of in a similar way that Kyle Juszczyk is utilized with the San Francisco 49ers. We're talking lead blocking. Obviously, I think he's gotten very good at attacking angles and sealing guys, but also as a receiver. Sarah, I want to go back to the 2019 game against the Houston Texans, obviously the big breakout game for Drew Lock. We saw the Broncos set it up perfectly. Lead with Andrew Beck, but they never anticipated he was going to become a receiving threat. So he blocked, 1001, released across the field, and he had like a 25-yard catch and run there. The Broncos have not utilized Andrew Beck as a receiver as often as they should have, and he's got the tools, I think, to be very good, Sarah. So I like him. And then also Eric Saubert coming in, I felt like was the most consistent blocking tight end that the Broncos had. And when they needed to go to him in terms of the passing game, I felt like he was pretty reliable. What are your thoughts on these two guys, Sarah? Both unrestricted free agents for the Broncos. Should the Broncos build with these guys and run it back, or should they look on the free agency market?
Well, I think based on what you just said, I mean, really what we're talking about here with Saubert and Beck is the two better of the blocking tight ends or H-back, fullback, whatever you want to say, as far as what the Broncos had last year. And I know that obviously Noah Fant, Albert Okwuegbunam, they're such good receivers that it doesn't necessarily make that big. It doesn't move the needle too much to not have them be great blockers. But for Saubert and Beck, we've seen how valuable those contributions as blockers can be, having the three tight end sets at times last year, right? We trusted Saubert in there as far as like, if you're going to throw a tight end in pass protection, you trust him more than pretty much anyone else out there. And for Andrew Beck, I agree with you. It's sad that we have to go back to 2019 to really find a time where, hey, he was actually properly utilized, and that's just the craziest thing, like if anybody listening questions whether coaching has had an influence on the way that these Broncos players have developed or not developed, you can sense a theme with everything that we've been saying in these free agency previews, reviewing last season. To me, I would definitely try to bring both of these guys back on short-term deals. Now, since they're both unrestricted free agents, that kind of makes you wonder, are they going to have to be convinced by the coaching staff to come back? Like, are they going to want to go elsewhere and sign short-term deals with better QBs or better situations where they might be able to cash in beyond this season? I don't know. But obviously, with Hackett and the Green Bay Packers, I want to point to the fact that they really prioritize. You mentioned Kyle Juszczyk with the 49ers. The Packers really prioritized Josiah DeGuara in the NFL draft as a guy who can do a lot of the similar things. So I think that's obviously a key position in this offense. And we know that there's going to be some San Francisco ties. There's going to be some Green Bay ties. All of that stuff. So I think obviously Andrew Beck is a fit, and Saubert as well. I mean, you sign a guy like that, and what does George Payton say? You want to re-sign the guys that perform well for you. You want to develop in-house. And Eric Saubert, he did really well on that one-year contract. I don't think his advocates are necessarily still on the coaching staff, but he may have some new advocates in the front office, the pro scouting department. He did a really good job last season.
They, absolutely spot on there. And the thing with Saubert that stood out to me, just the amount of work he put in when he got here in the offseason. He, Albert Okwuegbunam, and Drew Lock, they all got together this summer. And I'd say probably from May and June, those guys were working every single day at a high school field, working on terminology and routes. And, he just wanted to learn the playbook a little bit more there. And he came in, and right away, we saw his impact in preseason. We were like, hey, who the heck is this guy? Like, there were so many things that Saubert did that he flashed in preseason that we didn't actually get to see used in the regular season. I'm talking using Saubert downfield more. We saw him with the check release to the flats, the arrow routes, and then he would get upfield, but we didn't see too much more of that. If Andrew Beck departs anywhere in free agency, you know where I could see him end up? I could see see him end up in LA with the Chargers. Obviously, Brandon Staley has gone against him. When he was the outside linebacker coach in Denver, pass rushers had to deal with a guy like Andrew Beck coming in and chipping. And we've seen in just his history of Chargers, organizations stealing away former Broncos tight ends. We've seen that consistently throughout the NFL. I could see Beck ending up there, but he's going to be one of those names, in my opinion, Sarah. I feel like if he leaves the Broncos and goes to a really good offense, I think we'll see a lot out of Andrew Beck that we never got to see here in Denver, and that's not his fault. That's simply on the old coaching staff and the old regime and the offensive philosophy there. So there is that question there. Now, I think when we take a look at some free agents there, there's an intriguing name that's available. And look, the Broncos are going to have money, and I'm a big believer, even if you have money, you don't have to spend it, right? You can be smart with it. There are some names on the tight end market that if you do lose a guy like Saubert or Beck, then, obviously you have Noah Fant coming up on a contract year for the Broncos. You can't help but wonder, hey, do you kind of take a peek? Do you dip your toe in the water of tight end free agency? The Cincinnati Bengals have CJ Uzomah, who is expected to be an unrestricted free agent. I could see him potentially being franchise tagged or coming back to Cincinnati. I think they'll run it back, but he's an interesting one. Eric Ebron coming off the Pittsburgh Steelers, a big sizable guy, maybe in the red zone. Maybe it can free you up to where you can use Ebron as a blocker and put Noah Fant on the outside. These are just ideas. I don't imagine Denver's going to look too deep into free agency, but some of the names out there are very appealing.
They are. And I think obviously one thing that we have to consider here is the fact that maybe George Paton will want to upgrade over Albert Okwuegbunam as the tight end too with Noah Fant. I don't think we can rule that out. Of course, there's, some sentiment tied with Albert O in terms of, we thought he was a nice value in the draft. He's got tremendous upside as an athlete overall at the position. But the production over the first 2 years, that's what we're looking at right now. And George Paton didn't draft Albert O. So he may say, well, Albert O hasn't been a great tight end 2 for me, or he wasn't this past season. So maybe he could be a really good tight end 3 for me. Maybe he could be a nice option to rotate with Noah, and we get somebody else out there as tight end 2 who's a better blocker, who's a better just all-around player at the position. I could see that happening. So that's why I'm really interested in this tight end position in particular. And you mentioned franchise tag options for some of these guys, well, for Uzomah specifically. But for any of these tight ends, the franchise tag is not a prohibitive cost. It's just not. There's not a lot making a boatload of money in the NFL right now. So the franchise tag is really pretty appealing for teams that are, offering it up to these players. So to me, that could maybe thin out the market just a little bit. But there's some other names out there, Cody, that I think, man, this is a pretty loaded free agent class in general, but specifically at tight end, there's a lot of names that I could get on board for.
Well, we'll go through those names coming up here in just a moment, Broncos country. But before we do that, let me tell you about RockAuto.com, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And RockAuto.com has anything that you're looking for your vehicle, because they have everything that you could be looking for your vehicle. And you get to save time and money when you use Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, or 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or a local car dealership when you can go to RockAuto.com, who you have access to with computers at home and on your phone? You can access their website anytime you want to, and their website is super easy to navigate. You can quickly find all the parts available for the vehicle that you have based on year, make, model, brands, specifications, and even the price points that you prefer within your budget. That's why I rock with rockauto.com. Not to mention their prices are always reliably low, whether you're a professional or a do-it-yourselfer. So check it out today by going to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box? So that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. The tight end position is an important part. And as we talked about with rockauto.com, you have to have the right parts in place. There could be some additional pieces, right? If you ever want to upgrade something in your vehicle that is this Broncos offense, you could look to some different tight end options. You made a great point in the last segment here, Sayre, about maybe the Broncos, George Paton, maybe wanting to upgrade at tight end 2. Noah Fant is tight end 1. There are some intriguing options. We mentioned CJ Uzomah. We mentioned Eric Ebron. However, there's this consistent theme about Green Bay Packers players that, yes, we have made the allusion to here on the podcast or these free agency previews, but there is one tight end who will be available for the Green Bay Packers who's an unrestricted free agent that was an impact player at that position. Could he come over to Denver.
I could absolutely see it. Robert Tonyan, right? I mean, he had a huge 2020 campaign. Obviously, injuries limited him a bit this past season, but man, he was a big time contributor back in 2020 with, kind of his that would be his breakout season, I suppose you could say. And now he's hitting unrestricted free agency at the same time as a lot of really notable Packers teammates. Of course, Devontae Adams, a free agent, Devondre Campbell on defense, Rasul Douglas, breakout player for them. There's a lot of free agents the Packers have to kind of get their ducks in a row. So is Tonyan the odd man out? And if he is, boy, he's got a lot of advocates on the Broncos coaching staff, doesn't he? Nathaniel Hackett and obviously the new offensive coordinator, Justin Outten, was his position coach in Green Bay. So that makes a ton of sense to me, especially if you consider, hey, maybe the Broncos do want an upgrade at tight end too, or they want 1A and 1B, and Tonyan's willing to do that. I mean, the New England Patriots did it last offseason. I don't think anybody would have said, hey, you're going to be able to convince two of the top free agent tight ends to come play for you. The Patriots were able to go out and sign Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry and convince them that it could work, and it did for the most part. So I think the Broncos could easily do the same and say, hey, we have Noah Fant here, but we want you, Tonyan, to be our tight end 1B or 1A or however you want to say that. And he could be a significant contributor for you still. That to me would make a ton of sense when you're talking about coaching connections, you're talking about upgrading at positions. I would really, really love that, honestly, Cody. And people don't realize Tonyan, a phenomenal athlete, tested extremely well coming out of Indiana State. So speaking of athletes, so that test well, a player that's near and dear to my heart, OJ Howard, injury really limiting him in his NFL career so far, but the former first-round pick, taking one pick, I believe, ahead of Garrett Bowles in that 2017 draft. I think he could be a nice fit for the Broncos in free agency as well.
There's another player too. I mean, I like OJ Howard. As you mentioned, the injuries, I think, gives any team that's trying to maybe negotiate with his agent, like, hey, leverage, like, look, here's the deal. He was buried behind, I mean, there was a rotation, a 3-tight end rotation with Rob Gronkowski, Cameron Brate, and obviously OJ Howard last season for the Buccaneers. There was one game he had a breakout game in, but outside of that, I mean, he wasn't really being used. So he may be looking to go elsewhere. Look, Tom Brady's not on the Bucs anymore. Now he may be looking for an opportunity where he can get the ball more. And, look, maybe Denver is that place. I mean, we talk about it. A quarterback needs good receivers, which the Broncos have some good receivers. Sayre, they also need a good tight end, which I think the Broncos have the talent and all the potential there to have really good tight end play for them. It's all about how they get utilized. So I think OJ Howard will be actually an intriguing option alongside Noah Fant. I'm kind of excited. I mean, I like playing matchmaker here. I mean, this is like madness since we can go around and we can even create the rosters and even play around to see what it would look like on Madden. But there's also another name too, David Njoku. His contract is up with the Cleveland Browns, and things have been kind of dysfunctional in Cleveland as of late. Obviously, the whole Odell Beckham Jr. thing, Baker Mayfield, the drama surrounding that. But even a guy like David Njoku, there's always been, like, I think the last couple of years, this narrative that he wants out, he could be traded elsewhere, but now he's set to become a free agent. There's he and one guy from the New York Giants that also intrigued me about maybe coming to Denver.
I love the idea of Njoku. Of course, if Broncos fans are out here saying, well, we need to get an upgrade in the blocking department, I don't think Njoku is the first guy that's going to come to your mind. But like you said, there was rumors about trades, and stuff with him. And then he kind of played the role of good soldier. Like, you got to commend the guy for coming back and just being like, look, like, they signed Austin Hooper and they kind of just demoted him and they didn't really fit him into their offensive plans very perfectly, but he was able to get in season. He has one of the highest yard per catch averages, Cody, of any free agent tight end on the market, 13.2 yards per reception this past season, still played 670 snaps for Cleveland and 4 touchdowns. So he was still productive, and he did a good job of kind of coming back and saying, like, look, I'll be a team player. I'm not going to demand a trade. I'm going to finish out my contract, and I'm going to be a team player. And like you mentioned, from the New York Giants, Evan Engram, another matchup type of guy. We saw the Green Bay Packers a few years back. They really prioritized Devin Funchess in free agency. I'm not saying that Evan Engram is Devin Funchess, but a guy like Evan Engram could be similar, could be used in a similar way. I think that's an intriguing name, especially if you're talking about, like, hey, let's take a 1-year flyer on a guy to pair him up with Noah Fant and kind of see what happens.
Well, how do you feel about the options that we threw out here? Denver Broncos tight end potential. I mean, looking at the list of guys there, we talk about Saubert and Beck being unrestricted free agents. Broncos country, would you like those guys back? What type of role would you like to see them in? Or if the Broncos look elsewhere out of the names that we selected, or if we missed a name, let us know in the YouTube comment section. Let us know on Twitter at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos. Your tight end thoughts here for the Denver Broncos as we approach free agency in just about 3.5 weeks. But that will wrap up today's episode, Locked On Broncos. What can you look forward to tomorrow's episode? Well, great news. There's trade proposals going on here at the Locked On Podcast Network, and Locked On Packers host Peter Bukowski reached out with some trade propositions, 2 offers for the Denver Broncos if they really want Aaron Rodgers. So we play a little bit of debate. We go back and forth, and we talk about some potential trade options for the Broncos. We respond to his trade offer, and we even counter one of his trade offers with something else. You're going to get that on tomorrow's episode, Locked On Broncos, courtesy of Sayre Bedinger and myself, Cody Roark. Broncos country, we appreciate you as always. Thank you so much for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform. We're here on YouTube in video format. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.